踊れ狂ってしまえ抗うすれなき嘆きの鐘は響く絶望は甘い美薬諦めは手招きおいでよと落ちてしまう
And hello, and welcome to Echochamber, where I talk about whatever, whenever, however I want. Today, we continue the spoiler talks for Cold Steel 3. Today, we discuss the lore, we discuss predictions, and general speculation on that sort. And yes, these are coming out much slower and sporadically than I was hoping, but life is just sort of more busy, and other series are, taking longer to actually do than I was expecting, and this is, on the chopping block because it's completely extra in the first place, so sorry. I still have the same amount of spoiler talks. I'm probably going to do less of the book ones, but yeah. Cold Steel 4 has a release date though, so we know when we're going to get into that, so that's going to be fun. So, to begin today discussing all this, one thing that I hadn't... Quiet, Rean. One thing I hadn't done previously was I hadn't actually looked at two of the Black records because, I got so wrapped up in the ending I forgot to even go and look at them. So I figured I could do it here. So let's begin. In the years following the Great Collapse, Educator Arner chose Heimdall as his base of operations, from which he planned to rebuild the land of Erebos. Before long, the city became a pillar of the region, and following that, its capital. The citizens, however, continued to suffer in the harsh post-collapse world. They wished for a strong, caring leader to see them through these harsh times. It was in Arner their wish was granted. After being recognized as the educator by both the Holy Beasts, he was the clear choice. He was crowned as emperor and became the first of many rulers in the Arner bloodline. Upon his coronation, members of the Septian Church were dispatched from Arteria to endorse a new ruler. The people of Zemuria had lost the objects of their worship in the Great Collapse. However, the church provided them a new way of connecting with Idios, faith. In addition, by recognizing the legitimacy of rulers across the continent, they strengthened the foundations of its recovering civilizations. As well as, cementing themselves in, the public mind and whatnot. In the year 81 of the Septian calendar, the third emperor, Scion Arner, had a great cathedral built in Heimdall. The cathedral was to be a bastion of faith and would serve as a site to crown future emperors, but also held a far more significant role. Unbeknownst to the public, an artificial Primal ground was created below the cathedral, a replica of the one that existed below Arteria. And this is one thing that sort of bothered me since I finished the game. So we know the Primal ground was built down there. It's this big, deep thing, and it's a replica, right? And somehow, it went from below the cathedral to below the villa. Yeah? How? Did they pick it up and move it somewhere else? Or did they use some space thing? I know it happened when all that, dragon stuff was happening. And the Holy Beast had something weird going on, but why did it move? I guess there might have been something involving, space movement and stuff like that, because we have space septium and whatnot, and etc., and stuff like that. Maybe it literally transported. Another possibility is that Primal grounds themselves may be a bit different in how they actually operate, physically, in the same way that the Gral of Erebos only appeared in a specific situation. My thought on that matter is that it might be something like Phantasmal, or something like that, where it's sort of kind of there, but not really, So you could sort of kind of connect it, and it's not really truly entirely there. So you could sort of move it and technically have it wherever, in a sense. Maybe, possibly. But, you know, just speculation. With the church's increased presence, the desperate times following the Great Collapse came to an end. The people had lost their civilization, but now had faith to sustain them in their search for light in the Dark Ages. However, 200 years later, the darkness that gripped Erebonia pulled them down to the depths of ruin. One of the holy beasts suddenly disappeared, along with the primal ground below the cathedral. It was that same day that the Dark Dragon's miasma laid waste to Heimdall. Yep. Again, how did they move it? We know it moved, and we even know that the story we were given in some form might have things that are wrong, right? From Instructor Thomas and whatnot. So, okay. Twilight begins. Between flame and earth, the wavering darkness begins to spin the tale of the end. First, the conflict of the great gods of the Second Pillar. Second Pillar. I'm going to scrutinize every little detail here. Pillar. They mentioned that Heimdall was a pillar. I wonder if that's just a coincidence that they're using the same technology for that. Became a pillar of the region. Because that actually has a meaning. It's a pillar, it's supportive, basically. It supports the region. But this could mean something else. Maybe like the salt pail, maybe? That's sort of a pillar shape. What else is pillar shapes? Okay, so like, not a whole lot of things have pillar shapes. So maybe the towers that we saw in the sky, stuff like that. What could that mean, though? It feels like great gods of the Second Pillar. It could be meaning in the same way Heimdall is a pillar, where it's a pillar to, like, it's the center of civilization being supported and having some semblance of consistency, or something like that. It could be something like that. Like the Oriole probably had its own, and I imagine Crossbell probably did too. That sort of thing, where it was a hub of civilization, possibly because of the Septarians and whatnot. And the reason these two had conflict because they were in the same area and they were overlapped, etc., etc., etc. Maybe that. Maybe it literally means pillar. Second, the fusion of Earth and Flame and the completion of the 7 vessels. We know about that. Septarian of Steel. Third, the beginning of the 1,000-year city and the acceptance of the Gral. That I'm not sure about. Obviously, 1,000-year city Heimdall. Acceptance of the Gral. We know the Gral, that's the corrupted version of the Primal Ground, right? Technically. Right? It's something that was created via that? How do you accept that? And I think I'm reading a bit too much in like individual wording and stuff like that. I don't know what to make of that, but it's interesting because you feel like it should have meaning at the very least. Fourth, the disappearance of the Holy Beast and catastrophe of the Whispering Dragons. So this comes after the acceptance of the Gral. Okay. And also, Whispering Dragons. So like the Dark Dragon, presumably. Whispering. Oh! Whispering. That was something else in one of these other ones, right? With, Dreikel's. It was a whispering voice in the back of your head. It's like the curse itself, right? So whispering itself probably refers to the curse itself, right? So it's the whispering, just like, curse, which I interpret as like the lingering will of conflict from that original conflict. The recapture of the capital and Vermilion Curse, we know about that. Lion's War and Sacrifice Holy Mailing, we know about that. Appearance of the giant pillar in the north and the unwanted child. That would be the salt pail, right? Not sure about unwanted child. I do have a vague memory of someone mentioning in the comments, and it's been a long time. This is several months after I finished the game that I'm actually recording this. Mind you, a lot of the notes and speculation I did were like before the last episode even went off, so I'm a little detached from my original thoughts on some of these. Now that I'm getting to this, though, oh, my mind's racing again. The appearance of the giant pillar in the north. Okay, so it also is a giant pillar. They're referring to it as a pillar in the same one. So maybe it literally means pillar. Maybe both of them literally mean pillar. And maybe there's other salt pails. Maybe there are other pillars that do something different than the salt phenomenon, or something like that. Maybe the salt pail was an artificial one or something like that. Some experiment by Ouroboros or something. A thought. Or maybe it had to do with a different Septarian that was up in the north and whatnot. Unwanted child. I have a vague memory, I started saying this before. I have a vague memory someone mentioned that something, I don't even remember the context. I just have a vague memory of someone mentioning that Wiseman was from Northumbria too. I might be wrong about that. I might be. So, if I'm remembering correctly, and probably I am, that might be referring to him. 8th, the sacrifice of the village in the 100 Days campaign, we know about that. Great Blue Tree to the east and the appearance of the Cursed Castle, we know about that. Thus, the 1,000-year-old wish fulfilled. Interesting. You think that refers to the curse? Mind you, I have a lot of thoughts already sort of detailed on this. Some of this is new and I hadn't really considered before. But, 1,000-year-old witch, you think that refers to like the lingering conflict that I interpret, the curse that I interpret as a lingering will for conflict. That was what these original Septarians were trying to achieve when they fused and whatnot, and was never truly achieved. But if that thought is something that's true, do you think that the curse could be fulfilled? As in there's an end state to it, maybe without destroying the world. Obviously, the fear is that it'll destroy the world. But if there's... You might be able to stop the curse by fulfilling it without actually, involving the rest of the world. Maybe you could do that. An idea. Maybe that's how Cold Steel 4 will go. You know what? That's my prediction. That's how Cold Steel 4 will go. They'll stop it by fulfilling the conditions of the curse in some way that doesn't actually destroy the world. Yes. When the sacrifice is made and ancient blood flows, the path to the Gral of Erebos shall open. And the tainted holy beast is pierced by the blade of the world's end, and its blood fills the Gral. The great twilight shall fall upon this land. Which I think that's the part of it that seemed important and we had heard before. Okay. Ooh, that does get my mind racing again. I have a list of notes on other things that I wanted to just speculate on or talk about and stuff like that, just from the lore and stuff, so let's get into that next. I'll be back as I reposition myself. I'll be back soon. And back to my normal recording position for this sort of stuff. Hey guys, it's been a while since I've done a, proper spoiler talk. Even last time was a lot of character arcs and or character opinions and stuff like that. Well, I went through the remaining Black records. I have a list of things to talk about, and I'll probably try to chapter them each time so you can know what I'm talking about each time, just for your sake. So first thing, the cycle. I forget exactly what I was thinking the cycle was. So if you remember back to my original spoiler talks after the Cold Steel games, I was like, I feel like there's some sort of cycle going on here. Sort of. It sort of kind of happened to an extent, at least with Erebonia. And honestly, it still might have happened. I think I'm going to sort of like pull that into my theory of everything and stuff like that. At least that's how I'm seeing it at the moment. That there's some semblance of a cycle happening where, at least for Erebonia, it appears that the stuff with the Divine Knights, it's happened a few times in the past. It feels like it's not a new endeavor, where maybe this is like the culmination of like the Black Records prophecy and whatnot, but at the very least, it seems like it has happened. On that topic, Reincarnation, which is really where I'm getting into on this. The concept of a soul. So my theory of everything, which I will note, I'm actually going to have like timelines and predictions and stuff like that when I develop that for the third part of the Spoiler Talk series. The concept of the soul, in my eyes, is the idea of combining mirage, which in a sense is consciousness itself, time, which is the perception of time and the progression of events, and space, which is the perception of the world and space, and spatial perception, time perception, and consciousness combined together create an actual soul, basically, that could essentially make up a personhood, that sort of idea. And through that, you can interact with the world through a vessel of some sort, like a body or something else like that. Because you have stuff like Potter Mater and Valimar and stuff like that. It obviously doesn't require brains and that sort of stuff exactly to develop these. On that topic, there was a very interesting thing that they pointed out that's sort of at the center of my thought process for a lot of this. The idea that when they entered the Gral of Erebos, someone mentioned, and I forget who, it's been a while, that it felt like there was like a heartbeat going on, that sort of thing. And I almost wonder if that heartbeat could be a connection to, say, a Septarian or something else like that. It's just a source. Maybe Septine veins are literally veins. It's like a heartbeat. It's like energy, that sort of thing, where it's just flowing from an original source, that sort of idea. potentially creating a cycle of energy where things like maybe you die and you get brought back in. Maybe that could create something like Reincarnation. Because I was speculating this at the end of Azure, right? When I was trying to make predictions about Cold Steel 3 and stuff like that. I think I predicted that Rean was going to be essentially like a reincarnation of Drycles. And that's sort of I still have that sort of thought process on the matter, where it feels like there's a decent chance that each of the people are basically a reincarnation that are going through a cycle, and that's why they're connected to, like, say, Valimar to a specific other one. That sort of idea. So, yeah, I wonder. It's more speculation at this point, but it feels like that could come together. There's some semblance of coherency to how that could work. So yeah. Which could potentially maybe explain Osborne's heart? Maybe the Septian veins themselves, if he's like directly connected to it. Maybe the immortality thing is connected to this in some fashion, where he doesn't need a heart, where he's connected in the same way that, say, Valimar and Rean can be connected, and he can, like, sort of disappear and show up inside Valimar, that sort of thing, where maybe you could have a circulatory system that is controlled by an outside source, like, say, the Septian veins heartbeat and something like that. You don't need an actual heart at that point or something like that. Maybe that's how that works. Maybe Osborne himself could be a reincarnation of, say, the original lead from the Black Workshop way back when. Maybe that's why he was embraced as the lead by Franz and they like him so much. Of course, it could just be a competency thing, the same reason he became Chancellor, but, you know, an idea, at the very least. It's possible. That would also beg the question for all these other people who they might have been reincarnated from and stuff like that. And I almost wonder, it would be really interesting if the 7th Divine Knight was like Altina. I don't think I have any reasoning behind that, but I think I'm going to call that as a prediction. The 7th Divine Knight will be Altina in some way. I think the main reason is because she just had some... You would say it's probably more because of the whole project she was a part of and stuff like that. But she had, like, a weird amount of compatibility with, like, actually piloting a Divine Knight and that sort of thing. So maybe. On to the next thing on here. Ouroboros' intent? What the fuck are they even trying to do? Like, you look at the things they've done. So, you start with them, let's say, stuff before the game began. There's the various stuff trying to develop the ions and stuff like that with Rean and all that sort of stuff. Then you get up to Sky, where their big things, they want to get the Space Septarian for some reason to do something, and when that happens you figure, oh, they just want to get these powerful objects and use them for something. But then you get to Crossbell, and the only thing they're interested in is creating the Azure Tree. That doesn't achieve anything. That's like very much the opposite. They weren't trying to get any Septarian from there, were they? There's also the fact that they were perfectly willing to allow something that could control causality itself to just exist. Like, not under their control. And they helped out with making it a thing. They did. Obviously, there was probably the belief that, that they had to in order to, you know, fulfill the Black Record stuff, as we just saw, but at the same time, it's not like they were doing anything to make it appear then like, okay, we can't let you keep this power and just leave it as it is or something like that. This is gonna be, like, intrusive to our plans and stuff like that. So, whatever they're doing, either they were convinced that the Azure Tree was going to fall, or they weren't really worried about it actually interfering with their plans, even if it stuck around. I'd probably bet on the former one, personally, but then you gotta look at the events in Cold Steel 3. So ultimately, what was Ouroboros doing in Cold Steel 3? What they did was they performed some tests and decided, oh, we can't achieve this thing that we want to achieve. Osborne can. Let's go along with him. We may not get the result we want, but okay. Which sort of ties back into exactly what was Vita trying to, like, how was Vita going to try to achieve something similar to what Osborne did back in Cold Steel 2? My main thought on that matter has to be something along the lines of that she was trying to release the curse, right? And possibly maybe have that curse achieved and finished like that? Something like that? But that also begs the question, if she's trying to release the curse in some limited capacity that would also achieve their goals, even if not on a major capacity like Osborne was trying to, then what does the curse achieve for them? What could that possibly achieve for them? And the only thing that I could come up with is the idea that the curse might connect more of the world. In the same way that you have stuff... Okay, so like, we saw it with Crossbell and Erebonia, right? Where their weird phenomenon started crossing over with each other. And it's not like they disappeared from the original place. They literally started combining and stuff like that. So I'm basically left at the point where the only thing I can think of is that maybe they wanted to release the curse to simply connect the world. They wanted to let loose something that would connect all the Septian veins and influences of like Septian power and stuff like that, and make sure that they're all connected, and allow them to basically release some effect on it that would impact the entire world itself. That sort of thing. And that's sort of the only thing I can think of that makes sense to me. And maybe possibly when Vito was trying to do it, the intent was to fulfill the prophecy of having the blood... because we were left at the point in the prophecy where no ancient blood had flowed from Cedric and stuff like that. Right? And then, what's-his-face? Fuckface, I don't even remember his name from Cold Steel. He was annoying. From Cold Steel 2, basically threw him in the Vermilion Apocalypse, and that might have been when the plan went off the rails and it wasn't achievable anymore, maybe? So, maybe. My guess is that Vita essentially was trying to release the curse in some way, and she got up to the point of basically spilling blood, ancient blood and stuff like that. And then everything went off the rails. What she really wanted to do is she wanted to spill ancient blood, get the Gral up, stuff like that, and possibly use whichever of Rean and Crow were left, or have them both fight the Holy Beast or something like that to take it down in a much safer way, that sort of thing, that wouldn't actually properly release the curse or something like... I don't know exactly how, because it feels like, how would you... There's a lot I don't know, and I'm sort of taking stabs in the dark. I'd say sorry, but this is legitimately speculation. It's the entire point of this video. So yeah, my belief about Ouroboros' intent is that everything in this whole Crossbell / Cold Steel arc is basically to lead up to releasing the curse in some capacity so they could connect the world and do something to it, right? I have a few more specific ideas of what it could be, but those are way more out there, and I'm saving those for the Theory of Everything concept. I'll do in the next video. But I suppose my next bullet point here, now that I look at it, is the relevancy of the Phantasmal Blaze plan, which sort of ties into that. So my thought is, when Vita mentioned that the Phantasmal Blaze plan was such a good idea, or such a appropriate name for what they were trying to do, right? So my thought is that you connect the entire world with the curse, and you do something to blaze it, basically. Burn it down in some fashion. Is that burn down the entire world, or maybe something like that? Remember, some of my previous speculation has maybe the world they're in currently is a phantasma in its own right? So my idea would be that they're trying to burn it down by connecting everything and doing something to do that. So, again, I have a bit more specific ideas, but that I might get into later as I develop some of my other speculative thoughts here. Okay, yeah, my next bullet point, like I said before, it's been like 3-4 months since I actually wrote most of this. A lot of this ties into my Theory of Everything concept. So, Lingering will of conflict that's how I see what the curse is. You had the original, say, wish of trying to destroy each other that was never completed and they combined and stuff like that. So it's just sort of still there, infecting everything, infecting the Septian veins. And if they're basically like the circulatory system of the world around them, then if you break the circulatory system, couldn't you break the world itself? Or something like that? What if you degraded the world? What if you brought it to basically like a breaking point? What would happen? I guess there's a lot of questions that would pose if that was the case. Which sort of draws me into my next set of thoughts that I wrote down here. Divergent laws. We didn't really mention this at all in Cold Steel 3, but it was like a significant thing back in Cold Steel 2, as I noticed as I went through that for my extra recording and whatnot. Like McBurn having Divergent Law sword, and I think Love had one too. Okay, what exactly did I write here? It is one of the things I have never been able to really wrap my head around. It has been so out of left field with everything else in the series. It's just sort of like, oh, this is this thing that is just different because we said so. And it's like, what do you even do about this? But I have an idea. I do have an idea now. If the world everyone lives in is defined by, say, its makeup of different elements that make up everything, so my theory of everything concept is that everything is made up of different types of elements, right? And it's sort of funny because I'm playing Xenoblade recently and there's a lot of similarities there. And I never realized that until I said that right now. Where everything is made up of basically these different elements, how they interact, like my idea of the soul being a combination of them. Different types of those elements come together and create different materials like oil or rock or anything else like that. What if there are more elements? What if the world is made up of a collection of these elements, but what if there are more? If this is sort of just like a Phantasmal on its own, what if there are more elements outside? And that's what the Divergent laws refer to. Because if you introduce something entirely different, and this might refer to like the it that's inside Rean and McBurn and stuff like that too, what if there's just a different element, essentially, that when you throw it into this world, it just behaves really weird? And maybe that's the idea behind what Ouroboros is trying to do. You just inject this like completely divergent element into the like lifeblood of the world, and you just see everything go wrong. Because if it's anything like human systems, if you it'd be like having an adverse reaction to a drug, in a sense. It's just something that doesn't exist as part of you currently, and has all these reactions that it's not expecting, and the stability and all that stuff just falls apart, that sort of thing. Because like maybe that's what's happening over in the east, where you have all these places that are drying up and you don't have septium anymore. Maybe the septium veins themselves were just destroyed, that sort of thing, by having these extra different elements, these divergent elements, like applied to the actual veins and stuff like that. And you basically have the situation where you have everything falls apart and the actual circulatory system just implodes. You still have the world itself there, but the actual lifeblood of everything living in life and everything continuing on in a cycle of perpetuity words would just be cut off at that point, and that's why everything's falling apart there. Mind you, they are still just ridiculously vague about the Divergent stuff at this point, so I'm not betting on it, but it makes sense if I take some logical jumps and try to fit in my theory of everything. It'd be very interesting if I was right about that. Okay, after this, I wanted to talk about Primal grounds. I talked about this a little bit before during the Black Record stuff. Honestly, they're weird. They're stupidly vague about what they are. They're just like something that they made in order to completely restrict the use of artifacts and stuff, right? So, I don't know. What if they did something like the Phantasmas themselves? Like I was saying before, maybe they're like a mini Phantasma, that they're connected to the world and you can enter, but they're not really technically there, that sort of thing? What if you sort of made this isolated bubble that had a different set of elements that made it so that those artifacts were inert? They didn't have the same world around them, so they couldn't interact with it in the same way. So whatever technology is driving them just, goes poof. It's not really a thing anymore. And that's just sort of where I am at with those, because they're so stupidly vague. I have no other idea of how that could work. And that's just that's a complete speculation. I made like 20 different logical jumps to get there, so I'm probably going to be wrong about 90% of what I'm talking about here, but I just sort of wrote down ideas and I want to go through them, so I'm sort of on the same thought process with Stigmas. They're so vague as concepts. They're transferable. They need to be connected to some emotional strife. They're this mass of power that can be used to just do stuff. There's a lot of stuff with the church, Primal Ground Stigma, that sort of stuff, that is just so out of left field that it feels like there has to be an explanation there, right? It's gotta be. And I'm not sure. It feels like you basically have to do like a hop, jump, and a skip in order to even think about them in any coherent way outside of the vague ways they've been talked about. Well, okay, down to some of my final stuff. So some of my theories for Cold Steel 4 and beyond, I suppose. I believe the Grandmaster is a fallen Eidos. I'll get into a bit more specifics on how I think this works together in my theory of everything stuff. And I know it's not exactly the most original thought in terms of who the Grandmaster might be. But I think the idea of the final Orpheus plan might be more revealing than it seems like it could be. And I try to address this in my theory of everything that I'll do for the next time, and I'll post before Cold Steel 4 releases. But Orpheus, that story, is the idea of essentially going to hell and bringing back a dead loved one. While I don't think that's the entire objective, I sort of think that that might be it. That the end goal is essentially to get to, quote, Gehenna, end quote, whatever that might entail. That sort of thing. And make it possible to bring back dead souls and have them, revive or something like that in some form. Whatever form that takes. The reason that I think that the Grandmaster is probably Eidos is... I think I said it before, but I think my thought process on that is essentially... I'm trying to remember if I talked about this in previous spoiler talks or if this is just something that I have such as a fundamental part of my idea of speculation for my theory of everything that I think I just thought of it a while ago, before I started all this. But the idea is essentially that Eidos is the consciousness formed of the world itself. So it's like, if you have a world that's made up of all these elements, eventually you're going to have something in the source of the world, the source of its stuff, that forms into the essence of a soul, essentially. And that takes over, basically. And then Eidos is that will, that consciousness, rejected in some fashion from the world, either by some set of events, and then placed into a mortal body, which also would be immortal, because whatever happens to the Lance Maiden and whatnot, that made it so that she just, was immortal now, because, reasons might have happened in the same fashion, or made it possible to happen in the same fashion. I'm also going to predict that the curse will be ended with some secondary method to complete the lingering little conflict without actually destroying the world or Erebonia or anything like that. I would be very surprised if they actually end Cold Steel 4 on a the world is basically, gonna be gone sort of a situation. At least via the curse. If the curse isn't actually settled by the end of Cold Steel 4, I will be very surprised. Because there's a lot more to this story. Another prediction for Cold Steel 4. The only people that are going to be dead of the major characters, I'm going to predict Viscount Arcade, Osborne, Alberic, and Million. Osborne and Alberic seem sort of obvious, they're sort of on that path. sort of got to imagine that they're going to go that direction. There's actually something mentioned about Osborne, well, about Tio specifically. I'm trying to remember if it was in Cold Steel 3 or the Crossbell games, where she specifically said that she was losing her feelings, and being part of the SSS brought it back. I wonder if Osborne and Franz Reinford, who seemed to be these loving people previously, might have gone through a similar process where they abandoned, maybe willingly, basically the feelings that made them actually care about, like, say, their families and stuff like that, in the same way Teal was sort of losing her emotions because all the experimentation that was happening from the cults and whatnot. I wonder if that's possible, if Osborne and Franz went through some process that caused them to lose their actual, feelings for, like, Rean, Elisa, and stuff like that. So that's another thing. I thought that was on my list. I don't think I talked about that. Yeah, but it feels like their arcs, whatever it's going to be, is probably going to end with them being really close to achieving exactly what they want, and them dying in the end. I sort of bet on it. Viscount Arcade, because it feels like he's the sort of person that is... He seems like someone who would make sense from a thematic point of view to have dead. Of, people growing up and that sort of stuff, and overcoming problems, and him, being on the decline, and that sort of stuff. I don't believe they're going to keep Oliver dead. I don't think they're going to keep Toby dead. Toval. Why did I have Toby in my head? I don't think they're going to keep Toval dead. I don't think... They didn't technically even confirm they were really dead, right? They sort of tried to imply Angelica was dead. I don't think she's going to be dead by the end of it. They might be dead, too. They just might, get brought back or something like that. With the snap of your fingers or something like that. And Milliam. I would predict Milliam is going to be dead by the end of... Well, dead and stay dead at the end of Cold Steel 4. Because... her character arc feels like it's at a completion. Her sacrifice was sort of the culmination of all the growth that she had. That sort of stuff. Does she get rewarded for all that? No, obviously not. Not in this case. But if there's anyone from Class 7, and honestly, if they just have all of Class 7 alive and, good at the end after all the shit that went down at the end of Cold Steel 3, I'd almost be disappointed just from a storytelling perspective. But if there's anyone in the class who would stay dead by the end of it, it should be Milliam, just from a storytelling perspective, because her, and honestly probably only her story, feels like it's actually come to a conclusion. She's actually completed a character arc in my head. So yeah. And that's where I am. I will edit this down to something a bit more coherent. Next time on Spoiler Talk Part 3, The Theory of Everything. My planned format for that is I'm just going to narrate a telling of the history of the world from what I see as its beginning to what I see as the ultimate story end of the entire saga. And I'll try to provide some of my reasoning as part of a textual thing that's aside, like in the description or a comment or something like that. And I'll get that posted before Cold Steel 4 comes out in October. So, I'll see y'all next time. Hopefully some of my theories here were compelling and stuff like that. I rambled a bit more than I normally would, but everything's so inconclusive that it's sort of, I have to tie it back to some of my more general theories just to make sense of them, instead of, it actually making sense altogether by itself. So, I will leave it there, and I will see you all next time. Drive safely, everyone.